So there are a lot of haunted places around. A lot of fascinating and interesting old stories. And I mean, way back in the pre-colonial times, this place was believed to be haunted. There are a lot of these old legends where the Native Americans believed that there were ghosts all up and down the Susquehanna River Valley, which I think is really cool. And then they had their burial grounds. And then the settlers came in and pretty much built on top of most of them. Which, I mean, honestly, you look at Lock Haven's history, and like the early part is very much like the first chapter of a Stephen King novel. So I think a lot of this stuff kind of comes from that. I've been interested in collecting ghost stories for like most of my life, and I've got to say I feel Clinton County is kind of something special there. We have got a lot of these fascinating, neat stories. When they were building the canals, back in the 1820s, when they started building the canals, down there on Water Street, there's Canal Park, and that went right through some Native American burial grounds. Okay, they basically cut through, and matter of fact, one of our local history books describes very thoroughly how they cut away half of one of the burial grounds as they built the canal through it, and says that the banks of the canal were white with bone dust for the first couple of years. Just because, yeah, you guys are eating, okay, sorry. But there are a lot of these old fascinating stories like that, and a lot of reasons that Clinton County is said to be haunted. Now, when the first church congregation was established here, Great Island Presbyterian, not the oldest church, but the oldest church congregation, they were founded in the late 1700s with local traveling preachers like preaching on the banks across from Great Island. So hence the name, this explains why the church is like a solid, half-mile away from the actual Great Island. And they built a church eventually, but when they got up the money to buy the church, the property they were able to buy was not down near Great Island, but instead up on the hill. A lot closer to like Summit Street on the south side of Bellefonte Avenue. So they built the church, they established a cemetery over there. And the cemetery actually was believed to be haunted. There were a lot of old stories about the cemetery. There were supposed to be two women there, a lady in black and a lady in white. If you were like walking by and you saw the lady in white, okay, she was pretty benevolent. The lady in white was okay mostly. But if you saw the lady in black, that meant that you or someone in your family was going to die. That was the belief. There is an old newspaper article about a man who was walking by and said the lady in black ran out from the cemetery and grabbed him by the wrist. Now, he reported this anonymously, by the way, so there's no way to check and see if, he or his household died soon after that. However, as this was 1901, it's safe to say, yeah, they're dead by now. Now, Great Island Cemetery, I'm here describing this, and that was up along the south side of Bellefonte Avenue, ran roughly between Highland and Pearl Streets, midway up the hill there. And no, it's not there now, or at least the top half isn't. In the late 19-teens, around 1918, 1919, there was talk of Great Island Cemetery being in disrepair. Nobody was caring for it, nobody was keeping an eye on it, so City Council voted to pack up Great Island Cemetery and have it moved. They contacted families of the deceased, if they could find them, and they took the headstones, they dug up some of the bodies, and moved them to other cemeteries. Highland, Dougstown, Cedar Hill, Flemington, all of them got bodies from Great Island Cemetery. However, it was something of a sloppy move. Obviously, clearly done by the lowest bidder. And a lot of it remained behind. I've got access to the records from the old Great Island Cemetery. Matter of fact, the Genealogical Society has copied these into book form, and I've even got a copy at the house. And it contains a list of people known to be buried in Great Island Cemetery, and then unfound, moved to Highland, moved to Cedar Hill, unfound. I mean, years later, there's still stuff turning up in Great Island Cemetery. As a matter of fact, keep your eye on the newspapers, because in a shameless bit of self-promotion, I'm going to give you a bit of a teaser here. I just sent this in this morning. Gravestones from the old Great Island Cemetery have turned up in a yard, and they're being moved to Highland. But to this day, there are a lot of people living in that neighborhood who report hauntings, which is no surprise as they basically built a lot of the houses right on top of where the old cemetery was. Two of the bodies that were moved to Flemington were said to have been petrified. The bodies had turned to stone. Two female bodies, Catherine Phillips and Lena Yost. Now, you make some connections there, okay? There's two female ghosts, two female petrified bodies, so you have to wonder if there's a connection, if it's not Catherine and Lena who were running around in Great Island Cemetery. Another one of the ghosts might be John Michael Conley, who was a notorious criminal back in the early 1800s. He and his partner, David the Robber Lewis of Bellefonte, ran around this whole valley, robbing and killing people. They were finally shot down along the Cinemahoning in 1820. And John Michael Conley he died en route back to this area and was buried on the outskirts of Great Island Cemetery. Later on, his body was dug up, his skull removed to be used at the university, and the rest of it reburied. So somebody up there is haunted by a headless criminal. Don't even tell me this isn't a great place to live.